So welcome everybody to the next webinar or hubs on stage, as we call them, and yeah, every time they become more interesting. Ines and her colleagues were putting this label very high, so we are seeking for new topics and issues to discuss with you. And then we came to a mix of different policy issues regarding how to develop a bioeconomy strategy. Although some of the countries around the Baltic Sea have a separate bioeconomy strategy, some countries have a mixture or a more spreaded approach. Some countries have more bioeconomy or biotechnology approach, and the others has the biomass approach. So still this strategy is a hot topic. It's not a closed one because the EU Environmental Action Plan and EU Bioeconomy Strategy that was renewed 2 years ago provides also the points of discussion, how to proceed and what should be part of the strategy and what should not be. And plus the new EU strategies like the European Green Deal and the Biodiversity Strategy and the Circular Economy Action Plan and others have also posed a question how to react on those policies and how to develop a concise bioeconomy strategy. So I am starting off with let me see, where is this? Probably this one. Can you see it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we are talking about the bioeconomy strategies and Jesus. In the context of sustainability and policy coherence. And
sorry, Kaja, could you please put the right display on? So on the upper selection display settings, you may choose the other one, the middle one, that. And then what does it say? Swap presenter view. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm starting off with more of a general context and background, and then my colleague Argo Peepson from the Estonian Ministry of Rural Affairs was so kind to introduce our strategy for agriculture and fisheries, and also this quite complex and long process of developing this strategy has given also good experiences for the future, how to handle those issues also from the point of view of bioeconomy. And what parts are still missing from the mosaic of the bioeconomy in our strategy. Plus, Argo is also a contact person and involved from the ministry side in an EU project which specifically develops the methodology and approaches for developing national bioeconomy strategy in the Central and Eastern Europe. And also there are some interesting components of this project that might be of interest to our project as well, especially the information sharing platform. So I will start off with a more larger context, and with the SDGs, which is a very broad umbrella for the bioeconomy. Can I make it smaller as well? Okay. This comes from the planetary boundaries concept, where the biosphere, the living environment, provides the basis and also the boundaries for the development of society and economy. And in our discussion paper, what we wrote with my colleague Kaidi, then we looked at those tasks under the SDGs that are relevant from the bioeconomy point of view. And we found quite a number of them. And this is where we emphasized under each of the SDG, what is the relationship with the bioeconomy and how to build a sustainability wedding cake, so to speak, of bioeconomy. From the December 11th last year, we have a new umbrella policy within the EU, which is called the European Green Deal. And just to summarize, the principal idea of this deal is that it's the efficient use of resources. EU should be moving to a clean, circular economy pathway. The biodiversity conservation and restoration is important. Also, cutting the pollution is in the agenda. And this transition from the resource intensive economy to the green economy, the sustainable economy, should be just and inclusive. And by 2050, Europe should become a climate neutral area or territory. So this is a rather ambitious plan, and it consists of lots of components, and here I have emphasized with red triangulars the linkages with the bioeconomy, and starting off from the clockwise, then the transition to circular economy is definitely in the agenda and should be taken into account also when developing bioeconomy strategies. Zero pollution, also the shortening of transfer from food production to the consumer table. The farm to fork strategy is definitely a part of bioeconomy strategies as well. The transformation of agriculture and rural areas is absolutely a must within the bioeconomy strategies. And of course, the modernized and simplified common agricultural policy is part of the goals as well. When we look at the 9 o'clock part of this loop, then the climate neutrality, also the clean, reliable, and affordable energy is definitely part of bioeconomy as well. And this May, European Commission also publicized the EU Biodiversity Strategy, which also puts rather big strings on bioeconomy as well. So all in all, in this quite complex system, you can find linkages and approaches to bioeconomy altogether. European Commission has also provided 10 key actions, and I have highlighted in bold those who are more or less directly affecting bioeconomy strategies at the national level, but also the EU level. Definitely it's the climate ambition, the circular economy, the common agricultural policy, also the biodiversity issues, toxic-free environment, and mainstreaming sustainability, and of course several other aspects in the key actions as well. When we look at the biodiversity strategy, then it really puts a very high ambition already to be achieved by 2030 in 10 years time. Most importantly, perhaps, is the goal to have at least 30% of land protected in Europe by 2030, and the same amount of sea land and marine areas to be protected. And when I'm looking at the Estonian case, then we also have been rather proud that we have 23% of our territory under nature conservation, but now some 7% more has to be added. And together with the other targets, as you see below in this graph, it really puts this ambition on test. And the circular economy action plan, when you look at the right side of the fact sheet, what is expected at the EU level and how the national strategies should correspond to, then of course from the bioeconomy point of view, the materials, the organic textiles, bioplastic, different other biomaterials, and also those materials should contribute to the reducing waste. And when we go back to the bioeconomy strategy and look at whether it's in line with the new policies of EU, I would say there is a quite good consistency in that as well. However, when you look at the right side of the fact sheet, the list of different bioeconomy sectors or subsectors and their role, of course, the questions arise. What would be the policy challenges to the bioeconomy strategy? And here I have highlighted some of the challenges, but also opportunities. Opportunities to be more creative and to develop new new governance systems, new materials, and how to reduce the impacts on the environment on the one hand, but also to be innovative with products and the services. To my understanding, this climate neutrality by 2050 is really an ambitious goal, and especially it puts the use of biomass for burning for heat and electricity on test. Probably it has to be reviewed, revised, those plans that have given quite a substantial role to biomass in energy production. The other thing is, as I referred to, the biodiversity strategy that aims at increasing the protected area coverage on land and at sea, which probably has an impact on the volume or the coverage of use of biomass, because more biomass, so to speak, will be under protection. But then it, on the other hand, also gives this impetus for creativity, how to use this reduced biomass. Also, on the other hand, the biodiversity strategy envisages that the forested area should increase. Of course, again, it raises the question, at the expense of what? Is it at the expense of the agricultural or farmland, or is it at the expense of some wasteland, brownfields? But this is the question to the member states. Also, the farm to fork strategy raises the question that organic farming land should be increased to 25% by 2030 already. And this is, again, has to be looked at in the context of these protected areas and the forested land, and how to find this compromise of land use. And arising from the circular economy policy, of course, the recycling of waste, reuse of materials, reducing single-use packaging is an opportunity, but of course also a challenge. And shortening the value chains from production to consumer. This has been long been debated issue, but now it has become a common goal. And also reducing the use of pesticides, quite an ambitious goal to do it, or to reduce 50% by 2030. Which again provides a challenge, but on the other hand also an opportunity how to best accomplish that, and how to do it in a just and way, this transition from the today's production to this green production. So these are some of the issues I wanted to raise regarding the new policy arena that we have got, and how to correspond with the biodiversity, with the circular economy and the bioeconomy strategies to those goals that the European Commission has posed. So this is my thoughts, and now I'm happy to take your questions or reflections before I give floor to Argo. Any comments or?
Yes, please, Hannu.
Okay, thank you, Kaija. Very nice presentation of the different proposals commissions conducted in the first half a year. Some remarks. First of all, I totally agree with you, Kaija, that this ambitious climate neutrality goal has potential impacts on the use of biomass and especially the forest biomass, and it's perhaps also something we should consider a little bit faster. The Commission is now proposing also these ideas of climate change mitigation targets for 2030, and already in this biodiversity strategy you mentioned, the Commission stated that they will update these renewable energy directives. So those will for sure have impacts on especially forest-based biomass and its role in bioenergy and in renewable energies. But more important is that perhaps, because majority of the strategies you presented were presented prior COVID-19, and it's perhaps good to also mention that even the coronavirus and its impacts have changed many things, including we working in distant, but the clear message from the Commission has been that they have not cancelled the Green Deal, but the Green Deal is a very, very elementary part of the Commission's recovery strategy, and the green recovery plus the digital transformation together are the core of next 3-4 years Commission's action. So in that sense, your project is very much also on the spot at the moment, and very, very and provides very, very nice examples how to actually combine the digital and green transition. So no questions, just comments. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Anno. And then you probably also know that the Commission is preparing a forestry strategy as well. So probably it should come out this year even.
Yeah, there's actually both Parliament, European Parliament and Commission are preparing that one. The Parliament was supposed to finalize it by, was it April? It didn't happen because of the COVID-19. And according to my knowledge, the Parliament's forest strategy will be revealed at some point in the autumn. Commission is also preparing one, but to my understanding, it's more 21. But it's of course of great interest of Nordic countries, of Baltic countries as well, because we have so much forest-based bioeconomy activities.
Exactly, yeah. Any other reflections or questions comments? Not at the moment, but then I give floor to Argo. Argo will share his screen with us, and please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I hope you can see my slides. So I'm Argo Peepson. Many thanks to offer to join this webinar today. I'm as an advisor at the Estonian Ministry of Rural Affairs. I just started about 3 months ago at the ministry. Before that, I was working at the NGO dealing with rural development and environment projects, so very similar to your position. So I'm quite familiar with the Interreg projects, and also we have had experiences with Horizon projects. So now I'm at the ministry and trying to coordinate all the activities in the Ministry of Rural Affairs regarding bioeconomy. And today I will speak about a little bit about Estonian Development Plan of Agriculture and Fisheries 2030. The document is under development now, close to final approval by the government, which will happen very soon. And the second topic to speak about today is, as Kaja already mentioned, Bioeast initiative and Bioeast Up project, which is so-called daughter project of this Bioeast initiative, and which is very similar to your project, and that's why I think it's important to cover also this topic and to see what are the similarities and how we can build synergy from those different projects. I'm Bioeast NCP from Estonia. I'm not directly related to Bioeast Up project. The coordinator in Estonia is Estonian University of Life Sciences, but as we are closely working together, then I also speak a little bit about this project. But now a few words about Estonian Development Plan of Agriculture and Fisheries 2030, which is our main development paper at the ministry. And the main aim of this development plan is the strategic development for the sectors of agriculture and fisheries, and which will define the measures and activities necessary for this implementation. And this development plan should contribute to the development and competitiveness of Estonian agriculture, fisheries, aquaculture, and also the food industry, as well as balanced development of rural and coastal areas, maintaining good plant and animal health, ensuring food safety, and preserving clean environment and biodiversity. The responsible ministry for this document is Ministry of Rural Affairs, but of course there are other ministries related into this process, as Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Social Affairs, Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, obviously Ministry of Education and Research, Ministry of Finance, as well as the State Chancellery participate, and all the partners and stakeholders and representatives of the sectors are involved. The process started already in 2018. There are many different working groups established for the development of this plan. There is steering group which will so approve the results of the working group. And as always, for this kind of huge development plans, there is also ex-ante impact assessment made already, and as well the strategic environmental assessment. The document will be coordinated with all the ministries and state chancellery. It is already endorsed by the government, but now sent to the parliament for approval and for comments, and then this final approval by the government will be happen very soon. Oh, I can say anytime soon. Few words about the content of this development plan. The vision of this document for 2030 is that Estonian food is valued and it's good to live in the countryside. And the overall objective is that Estonian food is preferred, that environment and biodiversity are preserved, food businesses are successful, and rural and coastal communities are viable. There are two sub-objectives. One related to agriculture, sustainable agriculture, another related to sustainable fisheries. And horizontal development issues, there are many of them mentioned, but for us now is important that also the bioeconomy is one of the topics described as horizontal development issue. And about the bioeconomy in this development plan, it is mentioning that Estonia has the opportunity to meet the growing global demand for food, feed, bioenergy, biomaterials, and other products based on bioresources. But the biggest bottleneck is low added value at the moment. And as well as the circular economy principles are not yet very widespread. And to realize this potential, what we have, cross-sectoral cooperation is needed, and the agreement of strategic developments at national level. So this is mentioned in this document now. For the actions, it is mentioned that support should be given to drawing up more specific bioeconomy operational programs at regional level, which I think is directly related to your project. So this kind of regional level operational program should describe the local specificities and regional resources and based on their location, and then the action should be taken on regional level based on those resources what are available. Also some words about what is written there about the problems and actions related to bioeconomy. So the development plan should contribute to the development of bioeconomy in the value chains related to agriculture and fisheries, and as well as aquaculture and food industry, and which I think is very important that it is also mentioned that one important direction of the bioeconomy development in Estonia is the use of residues and byproducts as a valuable resource. I think that's currently, especially the residues and byproducts, we have really underused or not used at all. So I think this is the right direction where to move. But the second one, the aquaculture and marine farming, which is also has a great potential in Estonia as well as other countries. across the Baltic Sea, but this potential is also very much unused currently. It is mentioned that efforts should also be made to set up biorefineries, also suitable for primary producers by supporting the necessary development activities. So biorefineries, what we currently basically don't have in Estonia, I think it's very important actually to support the development also this area, which should have or give more cost-effective industrial base and create also new jobs in the countryside. But this was the development plan of agriculture and fisheries. When we looked more brighter and lighter and the wider picture, then we have actually several horizontal strategies in Estonia. Let's say State Strategy Estonia 2025, which is also mentioning bioeconomy in many other aspects. Then we have under development a horizontal plan led by the Ministry of Environment. This is Circular Economy Development Document and Action Plan. They are not calling it the strategy or development plan, just the development document. Just I think it's strategic decision not to mention some words might be sensitive, but this process has just started and this development document should be ready by the end of 2021. Then we have this Estonian Development Plan of Agriculture and Fisheries, which is targeted to agriculture and fisheries. Then we have also Forestry Development Plan, also currently in draft position, and there are many discussions ongoing, very difficult discussions, how to go on with the forestry. Should we take more the sustainability approach, or should we see forest as an economic resource, or how we can find the right balance? So it's very hot discussions are ongoing currently in this topic. Then we have also renewable energy, the targeted energy economy development plan until 2030. It is already ready and approved. And then it's a big question, should we have also Estonian bioeconomy strategy? I come back to this question on my last slide. But currently, I think you have seen this map already, and it's maybe not anymore the latest status here, but and some countries are moved forward with the processes. But here you can see that Estonia has a bioeconomy strategy under development, which is technically true, because in 2015 a development fund was made analysis of bioeconomy in Estonia, and based on that Estonian bioeconomy strategy draft proposal was made by the Estonian Ministry of Rural Affairs for the government. But 5 years later, we don't see any changes on that. But I come back to this later on, why we are here still, and why we still say that our national bioeconomy strategy is still under development. And now a few words about the BioEast initiative and BioEast Up project. At first, BioEast initiative, it's not any project, as the name says, it's an initiative, and the governmental initiative targeted to Central and Eastern European countries. And its vision is to develop knowledge and cooperation-based circular bioeconomies, which helps to enhance growth and create new value-added jobs, especially in rural areas, and maintaining or strengthening environmental sustainability. And the mission of the initiative is to assist those countries to operationalize this vision and giving attention to the potential for sustainable increase of biomass production, circular, zero waste processing of available biomass, and to have viable rural areas. So this initiative started already in 2016. There have been many declarations made about the role of bio-waste in the context of Horizon, for example, which is signed by 22 ministries, and part of the Bio-Waste initiative are all the Central and Eastern European countries. So the ministries are involved, 11 of them. Also Serbia has asked for accession. Until now, this initiative has achieved many things. Here you can see some examples. There has been 5 big international conferences on bioeconomy. There has been built 5 thematic working groups, and from this initiative to Horizon 2020 CSI projects are grown. One of them is this Bioist Up, and also there is other one, Power for Bio. There are many things planned for next steps. As you can see, Bioist hopes to give guidance how to develop the national bioeconomy strategies, and will help the ministries to develop those documents. As well, in this Bioist initiative, national Bioist hubs for stakeholders engagement at national level is foreseen, as well as you have in your project. So we can see that there is already one common point. Also, there is plan to help build up or develop strategic research and innovation agenda. There will be foresight exercise for defining the potential future scenarios and priorities in Central and Eastern European countries. And there are also 5 thematic working groups built up for SRIA development on different fields. There is forestry, there is sustainable yields and intensification, agroecology. There is bioenergy, food systems, and also freshwater-based bioeconomy. And last thematic working group was just recently built, which is under coordination, but it's education, and I think it's important also to have this component in this Bioist initiative. And now a few words about Bioist Up project. It's coordination and support action in Horizon 2020. It started in October 2019 and will end on September 2022. The budget for this project is 3 million euros. There is 21 partners from 11 countries. 11 from them are Bioist countries, but in addition there is partner from Germany and 1 partner from Finland, which is Luke. And there are also 4 ministries involved, 14 research institutes and 3 SMEs. And the aim of this project is to support Bioeast initiative and to develop action plan for transition of those 11 countries to bioeconomy, and also help those governments to develop national circular bioeconomy strategies. When you need any detailed information about those this initiative, Bioeast or Bioeast Up project, then the contact details you can find here and check on later from this presentation if needed. But now I will come to this final slide and come back to this question of strategy or development plan of Estonian bioeconomy. There is one and first big question at first: do we need dedicated national bioeconomy strategy at first? But also there might be possibility that we trying to develop bioeconomy through other policy initiatives, which is not dedicated to especially to bioeconomy, as it is, let's say, wider horizontal, some kind of state policy document, as I already mentioned, that the development plan Estonia 2035, or do we have any other option? So if we like to have this bioeconomy strategy, what kind of approach we should take? Should we take biotechnology and life sciences centered approach, or transformation centered approach, or should we try to combine those both approaches? When we look at the other countries which already have bioeconomy strategies, we can also see their aspects like economy or sustainability. Many of them are really concentrated to an economical viability. Let's say Latvian strategy of bioeconomy is very much economy centered, but Austria and, for example, Sweden, they have taken this approach of sustainability. Obviously, many countries are trying to combine them and find the right balance of economic sustainability, social sustainability, and also environmental sustainability. There is also the big question how to influence the governments or maybe the wider society, why we actually really need to have bioeconomy strategy, how to communicate, how to involve different parties and interest groups. And for today, I think it's also important to think what will be the role of the different projects, because the projects have some kind of starting point and some kind of ending point. And the big question is also related to this bioeconomy hubs, for example, what will happen after the project period will end, who will then coordinate and develop further those platforms or wider bioeconomic issues. So I have many questions, but obviously not all the answers to all the questions. Maybe we can discuss it today or some other occasions later on, obviously. But I will stop there at the moment, and very much thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the bioeconomy and the role of the Ministry of Rural Affairs in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Argo. I would like to give floor to our colleagues who have been listening to you and probably have some ideas and clarifying questions or how to provoke the discussion. So who would like to go first?
Kaja, may I ask the question?
Yes,
but I
please,
have a very specific question related to what your colleague from the ministry told about the Estonian plan and the focus areas. And one of the focus areas was defined as biorefineries. And I'm just curious, on what scale of biorefineries is Estonia thinking about? Because we know that the scale of the biorefineries in Netherlands or in Belgium, in Germany, they are huge facilities. And even though they claim that they are accessible to small and medium-sized companies and innovative projects, actually it's very much dominated by big enterprises. So what approach is going to be taken by Estonia, and have you also considered the ownership structures? Is it like public-private partnerships, or you're targeting more like public shared facilities? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very good question, and I hope to have this question. Now I'm a bit in a difficult position because there might be that my view is not necessarily the view of the ministry, but but now I'm representing Argo Peepson just as a person, and my opinion is that our approach should be to avoid those huge factories and huge biorefineries. We already have one very good experience. There was a few years ago, one big private company was trying to start a forestry biorefinery factory in Estonia, and there was huge opposition to this process. There's a society, the whole society actually discussed this question, and there was very high opposition to this factory because of the volume and because of the social and environmental impact what this kind of factory could have. So I think we should avoid this mistake again and try to concentrate really small scale biorefineries, even based on one producer level. Let's say it's even possible to let's call it biorefinery, but it's basically possible to start small scale biorefinery also based on when you have, let's say, 70 milking cows, and already you have possibility to produce heat, electricity, and this residual is very good fertilizer. So we can call them also biorefineries, and this is the approach we should take and support. The second part of the question, that if those approaches should be based on the public-private partnerships, I think public-private partnerships as well, including also the research and science, it's the best way to find the best solution for bioeconomy and biorefineries. But currently I see that the start really should be with the support of the state and using the EU funds available to demonstrate that such biorefineries, or even a wider bioeconomy and valorization of bioresources is possible. And then in the next phase, we can move to more private investments and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hannu has a question, please, Hannu.
Thank you, Kaja, and thank you, Argo, for very nice presentation of the current situation in Estonia. It's very nice to see that you have this multidisciplinary approach, and you are including, even though there is one ministry that is responsible, you have also included other key ministries to the process. I would actually ask about the role of the forestry in bioeconomy. When you were giving your presentation, you were mainly talking about food, agriculture, and fisheries, but forestry, not only the big biorefineries, but other activities also play quite significant role in regional and even in national economies, including Estonian one. So how do you see the role of the forest sector and wood-based products in future Estonian bioeconomy?
Yes, thank you. Forestry is obviously in Estonia also very important field, and the forest is also obviously very important source of bioresources. The thing is that in Estonia, the forestry is divided between the ministries of environment and agriculture. And this creates kind of, I cannot say problems, but difficulties. As I mentioned, this development plan I was talking about concentrating on agriculture and fisheries, because the Ministry of Agriculture is responsible for those areas mainly. And the forestry will, the bioeconomy part of the forestry will be regulated through the forestry development plan. And for this is responsible the Ministry of Environment. So actually the big question is how we can better coordinate those processes and how we can better combine those strategic aims, because I think it's very important that bioeconomy is a horizontal issue and we cannot sit on our own silos and say that okay, that forestry is responsibility of the Ministry of Environment and we don't deal with it, and let's see what they are developing there and trying and hoping the best. I think it's very important to develop those areas in a coherent way and very communicated way to find the best solution. I didn't give any good answer, but that is the difficulty of those areas in Estonia.
Mm-hmm. But perhaps also, I mean, summarizing today's webinar, and I would also like to pose a question to Argo regarding this bioeconomy or BioEast initiative, which aims at developing common approaches within 11 countries in Europe on bioeconomy strategies, and have all the ministries who have signed those declarations have committed to produce a singular bioeconomy strategy, or it's not decided, or is it still up to the members of the initiative whether they would like to have separate sectoral strategies, or they would aim at a common joint bioeconomy strategy?
Yeah, thank you. I would say that our government has taken the position that we already have too many strategies and development plans in Estonia. And there was some change of the government a few years ago. And that is why currently the question of Estonian bioeconomy strategy is still under development already 5 years. So actually there is no clear decision made that there will be no bioeconomy strategy in Estonia, separate one. But there is also any other decision made as well. So it's under development still. And I hope in my new position to change the things and to move forward with this and find the way to have some kind of strategic horizontal document which will define the strategic goals of Estonia in the field of bioeconomy. I don't know if we call it bioeconomy strategy or if we would call it in any other way, but my hopes are high that the things will change.
Yeah, just my personal opinion is that perhaps an bioeconomy action plan would be a way out, which is, I mean, cross-sectoral and also having links to the forestry, to the agriculture and fisheries and circular economy policy documents, and maybe this
Yeah.
could be considered.
Yeah, in any way, I think bioeconomy as horizontal issue should be developed also horizontally. So it's that's the core.
Yeah.
And my personal opinion is that we should join the ministries of environment and rural affairs, but this is not my decision to make.
No. Okay. So do we have any further comments or questions from the audience? I can't see at the moment, so probably I should say the finalizing words that thank you very much indeed for listening to us, and perhaps it gave some fruit of thought and how to proceed, and also to keep an eye on this BioEast initiative and BioEast sub project. And perhaps we would also listen more about them in the near future. And as Argo said, also to maybe to establish more formal links and to invite the project partners of BioEast and vice versa, that we could also share maybe some common webinars when there is more information coming in, and then which is useful for both projects. What do you think, Riika?
Yes, I agree. Sounds very good proposal. I think we have lots of common between RDI 2 Club and the sorry, forgot the project name. BioEast Up, yeah, project, and we should discuss more and find some common interest and something to develop together. I'm more than happy to present BioBoard to you and our project to you. So I hope to stay in touch.
So thank you from my part, and looking forward to the